Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for October 5th, 2017. On today's show, we're going to be taking a look at a bunch of news, including a Bob's Burger movie, Star Trek Discovery changes, a story, what the story is for Pacific Rim Uprising, a new addition to the Back to the Future canon, and some surprising Avatar and Venom casting news. In our feature presentation, Hoai-Tran Bui is going to join us to talk about the quest to keep Blade Runner 2049 reviews spoiler-free, and the rise of spoiler culture. But with me now is Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's up?
And Slash Film managing editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
How are things going, guys?
All right, yeah.
All right, Jacob, is the move going any better? People
Things
demand an
update.
What?
For people who've been following this, things are looking up slightly. There's a chance things go a little faster than expected, so we'll see.
Okay, we'll keep you updated. Let's dive into the news. Bob's Burgers is going to get a movie in 2020. Jacob, you wrote this article for SlashFilm.com. What do we know?
Yes, pretty much all we know is that there will be a Bob's Burgers movie hitting theaters on July 17th, 2020. They haven't announced a director yet. They haven't announced a writer yet. I imagine the writers will be the show's writing staff, most likely, are people from there. I imagine the director could possibly be somebody who worked in the show. But that hasn't been revealed yet. All we have is that release date and the intention, a fun quote from series creator Lauren Bouchard, who says, to run to the very end of his quote here, "It has to be the best movie ever made, but no pressure, right?" So there's definitely a really fun, tongue-in-cheek quote. It reminds you of the humor of Bob's Burgers. And I'm not going to say I'm a Bob's Burgers super fan. For those of you who don't know, it's an animated series on Fox about the Belcher family who run a burger joint in this seaside tourist town. And it reminds me a lot of King of the Hill in that it has sort of very stripped down human characters who are very relatable. It feels real. But it also reminds you of early Simpsons and how it's sort of anarchic and gleeful in its comedy and can get very, very silly. So it's very much a show that, while it's never been as big as those two shows in terms of like maybe latching on to mainstream culture, it has a strong following, but I feel like its following comes from it being such a low-key, weird, eccentric little show. And I don't see how they translate to the big screen, but at the same time, all power to them. Have you guys watched this show? I'm curious if anybody else has a different opinion than me and how this could work as a movie.
I've never seen it. I've heard good things, though.
Yeah, I have also never seen it. It does seem strange that Bob's Burgers is getting a movie. Not many animated television shows, make that transition from the small screen to the big screen. Obviously, Flintstones and Jetsons and South Park and Simpsons have done it. But, there's decades of Simpsons television, and they have one movie. And Bob's Burgers has only been going on for probably 5-6 years, something like that.
The eighth season premiered just a few days ago. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
But unlike The Simpsons, which got its movie 20 years into its run, Bob's Burgers is still good. People can argue about which seasons are good or not, but it's getting a movie before it's overstayed its welcome. So I guess my main concern is that in the same way how The Simpsons felt the need to literally threaten the entire town of Springfield and turn The Simpsons into heroes for its movie, I don't want a Bob's Burgers movie where it's them having to go out on a grand adventure to save anything where it's life and death stakes. The show's charms are about how mundane it is and how real this family dynamic is and how much fun it is to be with these weird, lovable characters who care more about, paying their mortgage and getting by than actually doing anything that you'd imagine in a big screen movie. So unless they're making a really low-key slice-of-life drama/comedy animated movie, I don't know how it's Bob's Burgers is a movie. I'm really curious to see how they crack that.
It'll play at Sundance or something.
That would be funny. I don't know. I just don't see them making a feature film if it doesn't kind of have a grandness to it. You need to fill up that big screen in some way. As much as I'd love to see the Sundance version of that, I just don't imagine that that's what's in the plans for Fox. But again, I've never seen the show, so who knows? Moving on, Star Trek Discovery, which we've been talking about on the podcast, is doing some shifting. Ben, you wrote the article for slashfilm.com. What do we know?
So back in June, Star Trek Discovery's final premiere date was announced. As you guys know, it's had a few premiere dates announced over the past year or two, but the show is finally out now. Everybody has had a chance to check it out. So in June, when the official final premiere date was announced, CBS said that they expanded the show from a 13-episode first season into a 15-episode first season, and they planned on basically showing the series in two parts in that splitting that series, the season, into two parts. So 8 episodes were going to air this year, and then the remaining 7 were going to debut in January of 2018. Now that has changed. CBS has decided to make the first 9 episodes available this year, and then the remaining 6 are going to be airing in January as originally planned. So it's not like, we're not getting any more episodes than were originally slated, but yeah, it's just a little bit of a shift in their schedule. I'm not sure if this is due to the show's positive reception that it's received so far, because everybody seems to like it. I looked earlier today, and it has like an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's pretty good for a new show and something with super high expectations like this. Or whether this is just the result of the showrunners and writers sort of maneuvering their structure around for that big break that's going to be coming between November 12th, when the final episode of the first half of the season airs, and then January, when season 1 picks back up again. But yeah, that's the newest info on that.
And Ben, you still haven't seen this, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, you have no interest. But Jacob, you're a Star Trek fan. Have you watched the new Star Trek?
Oh, well, Star Trek Discovery premiered when I was at Fantastic Fest, and I have yet to see it. I have yet to subscribe to CBS All Access, which is my plan. And this is what happens when you're moving and you don't have all of your things to fall back on. But we had reviews from Lindsay Romaine, who's a Star Trek newbie, and a review from Monique Jones, who is a Star Trek fan who's doing it weekly for us. And both of them are positive on it. And Monique has her quibbles, but then again, all Star Trek fans have quibbles with Star Trek at all times. So even though I'm not caught up, everything Monique's been writing for us has been very positive, has been very, very excited to dive in when I finally am in a house with a TV again.
Yeah. Just to combat Ben's reluctance to subscribe to CBS All Access, one of my friends told me that he's planning on subscribing like during the last month, so that he can just, what is it, like $10 a month or something like that? So he can just subscribe for 1 month and binge watch through the season and watch the final 4 episodes as they air for $10, which isn't a bad deal. But I'm sure many people probably aren't doing that. I've watched the first 3 episodes. The first 2 episodes feel kind of like... Did you guys ever watch Battlestar?
Yes, I'm a big Battlestar fan.
So they had that miniseries that was before the first season, and the first 2 episodes kind of feel like that miniseries. It kind of feels almost like backstory, almost like disconnected, and almost like a whole totally different thing. It's very action-packed and not Star Trek. But the 3rd episode, finally, I'm starting to really like some of the characters, and it's starting to feel Star Trek-y. So I'm with it still. I'm subscribed. I'm all in to CBS All Access at this point, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Moving on, the official Pacific Rim Uprising synopsis has offered our first story details with the trailer coming out this weekend. Jacob, what do we know?
Well, what we know... Actually, before we go to synopsis, all we knew beforehand was that this sequel takes place years after the first one, and was going to star the son of Stacker Pentecost, Idris Elba's character from the first movie, played by John Boyega, who you may recall from Star Wars Force Awakens, Attack the Block, extremely talented young actor. But they released this 3-paragraph synopsis on the eve of its New York Comic-Con trailer reveal. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is a little long, but the basic gist of it is that John Boyega plays Jake Pentecost, a once promising Jaeger pilot, who abandoned his father's career to become a criminal, which is why, if you remember some set photos from a few months ago, there was some shots of John Boyega looking very tough, like on the streets. Apparently he gave up fighting monsters for a life of crime. But then an unstoppable threat is unleashed to tear through our cities and bring the world to its knees. When Mako Mori, who you may remember, his adopted sister from the first movie, leads a brand new generation of pilots, etc., seek justice for the fallen. Their only hope is to unite together, global uprising against the forces of extinction. What's most interesting about this is they don't specify what the villain is. They don't say, is it more kaiju? Is it more the same monsters? Or is it something new that has to unite the Jaeger pilots? But anyway, they also mentioned that there's a new rival pilot to Jake, played by Scott Eastwood, and a new 15-year-old Jaeger hacker named, I guess, 15-year-old Jaeger hacker. I guess it means he's a hacker and a Jaeger pilot. Who knows? Played by Kaylee Spaney. And that's basically it. There's some interesting stuff here about how Jake predicts a criminal, how Mako Mori, played by Riko Kikuchi, is back, and she's recruiting him to finish her father's work. There's a brand new fight. But it's one of those synopses that manages to say a lot while saying very little. Makes me wonder if the trailer is going to have a grand reveal of what's going on. Because the first movie never really explained what the kaiju were, other than they were like from a different dimension of some kind. So I'm wondering if that's going to be a big reveal of what they are, what their intentions are, and maybe that's going to be the big hook going forward. What do you guys think? I know that movie Twitter seems to be kind of divided on Pacific Rim. I feel like some people really hate it, but I really like it. I'm curious what you guys think about these new details.
I'm sort of right in the middle on the original Pacific Rim. I like the visual aspects of it, but I think that movie was too dark, like physically dark. It was difficult to see things on the screen at times. I wish that it was a little bit lighter, not necessarily in tone, but just, aesthetically, so I could get a better glimpse at the insane action that Guillermo del Toro had in store for us. That sounds sort of fascinating. I do like the idea of John Boyega playing sort of a classic, almost like a Captain Kirk-esque figure who's dragged into a life of heroism after being after sort of doing the classic, like, rejecting the call hero trope kind of thing. So it makes it seem like sort of a classical story. And if they can meld that to massive robot action, I'm intrigued.
I had a lot of fun with the first Pacific Rim. I was probably in the minority of people that loved it. And I think it's mostly for my love of Del Toro and the touches that he puts into it. And the fact of the matter is he's a producer on this, but he has not really been involved in this movie. And that is why I'm a little reluctant to get excited about it. I'm not as excited about, what is his name? Stephen Knight, the director.
Stephen S. the Knight.
Yes. Yeah. He did like Daredevil and some other TV stuff, right? And I don't know. I mean, yes, the story sounds promising. I've heard, I'm not sure if this is true, but I've heard that the Jaegers this time will like join together in a Voltron-esque like way, which could be probably the reveal in this trailer. I don't know. And maybe that's not true. Who knows? But maybe I'm just speaking out of my butt. But that sounds cool. I'm excited to see these kind of like anime tropes and this kind of like these visuals in live action, or as much live action as you could possibly get. But I don't know. We'll have to see.
I can't speak for Stephen S. Knight as a film director, but I will say the Spartacus series he ran for Starz is amazing trash TV, maybe the great trash TV of the 21st century. I love it to death. I don't know if Pacific Rim needs trash, but I feel like if there's somebody who can create great junk food, who's aware that, hey, I'm making a movie where the appeal is the basest instincts of what we like, which is robots punching monsters, I think he could be the guy, maybe even more than Del Toro, who I kind of prefer making more emotional, small-scale stories.
Okay, you sold me. I'm now interested. But we'll see. We'll see. The trailer's coming out this weekend, and we'll have an evaluation after that. By the way, we should say there's a lot of trailers coming out. Pacific Rim trailers coming out. We think the Star Wars trailer's coming out Monday. Justice League trailer is coming out when?
Sunday.
So, we'll probably have a lot of talk about that on the podcast next week. But back to reality, a new Back to the Future comic book series is exploring the final line of Back to the Future Part 3. Ben, just as you wrote up this mystery that didn't need to be answered in Star Wars, this comic book is attempting to do this with Back to the Future. What do we know?
Yeah, and this is a little bit different, but I'll talk about that in a second. So the basic gist of this is, to refresh your memory, if you don't recall how Back to the Future Part 3 ends, Marty and Jennifer are in 1985. Doc has stayed behind with his love, Clara, and then all of a sudden a time-traveling train shows up, and Marty and Doc have their final conversation, and it ends with Marty saying, "Hey Doc, where are you going? Are you going to go back to the future again?" And Doc says, "Nope, I've already been there." And then they get on the train, and it lifts off the ground, turns into like a hover flying vehicle, and then time travels away for the last time. So Bob Gale, who is the co-writer of the Back to the Future trilogy, has been working on Back to the Future comic books for IDW Publishing for the past few years. And now a new comic series called Back to the Future Tales from the Time Train is going to answer the question of what exactly Doc meant by that last line of, "Nope, I've already been there." And, I consider myself a pretty big Back to the Future fan, and I, for some reason, completely missed the implication that there was some other adventure that we had not seen. I always just assumed that Doc meant that he was referring to the time that he and Marty went to the year 2015 together in Back to the Future Part 2, when Marty was asking him if he was going back to the future. But I guess because this train has all sorts of crazy, pieces of technology that are necessary to make it fly and stuff, the implication is that Doc found a way in 1885 to go all the way to the future and then outfit this train with this, with this extra technology. So that's what this new comic book ongoing series is going to explore, that adventure and presumably some others involving Doc Brown and his entire family. So that's the latest.
But do we really need to know this story is the question. Like, I feel like it's self-explanatory. I mean, I'm sure there's an adventure that goes along with it, but all we need to know is he went to the future and got hover conversion for the train, right?
Right. Yeah, yes, in the most basic sense, yes. And I think this is going to be weird because I was sort of railing against this mentality when I was talking about it with Star Wars the other day on the podcast. But I feel like this is the kind of thing where it doesn't strike me as quite the same thing. And maybe it's just because Star Wars is so much bigger than the Back to the Future franchise is. And there are so many more tiny references and things that the Lucasfilm Story Group is having to explore deeper and sort of tie in this massive ongoing ever growing beast of marketing and product that they're constantly producing. And Back to the Future feels smaller to me, and it's like it feels more homegrown and more sort of fun. It's like, oh yeah, they're, to me it seems like this is one of the first things that they're doing like this. Like the comics, it's a relatively small scale thing, and Star Wars is just such a behemoth that it takes the fun out of it a little bit for me.
There's only one thing that trumps my love for Star Wars, and that's my love for Back to the Future. It's my favorite film of all time. I've been reading these comic books since they've been coming out the last few years. They're very entertaining. They're very light. The canon that they're introducing to the Back to the Future universe is kind of ridiculous, but you get to, in one of the first issues, you get to meet or you get to find out how Marty meets Doc Brown. There's this whole storyline with Lorraine's uncle, Jailbird Joey. They go back in time to the 70s. It's like this whole ridiculous thing. And probably the most interesting of these stories so far has been they show the alternate timeline story. It's called Biff to the Future, and they show Biff Tannen his diabolical rise to power in the alternate 1985 from when he gets the sports almanac. So it tells that whole story, which, obviously isn't something that is that current timeline by the end of the series, but it's fun. But I'm not sure how seriously we should take it. But yeah, it's definitely not going to spawn new movies. That's for sure.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of new casting that happened last night. The first of which is for the Avatar sequels. Jacob, tell us about it.
Well, here's what we know. We know that Kate Winslet has joined the Avatar sequels, playing a character named Ronal. I do not know if Ronal is an alien name or a human name. I feel like it's one of those names that could be both, but we'll find out. All we do know is that Winslet, who you may remember, worked with director James Cameron previously on Titanic, which broke her into the mainstream, made her a movie star. He had this to say according to Deadline. Kate and I have been looking for something to do together for 20 years since our collaboration on Titanic, which is one of the most rewarding of my career. I can't wait to see her bring the character of Ronal to life. I love Kate Winslet. Even when he's putting his foot so far into his mouth he's choking, I like James Cameron. At the same time, I have a hard time mustering enthusiasm for the Avatar sequels, which I feel seems to be a common thing amongst almost everybody on the internet. But I like James Cameron movies. I like Kate Winslet in just about anything. And even though James Cameron has been saying all these crappy things about Wonder Woman recently, I still think he has a habit of writing female characters who I enjoy watching. So the thought of these two working together in a sci-fi setting is pretty cool, especially since the other big casting news about Avatar recently was that they cast a bunch of kids to play Jake and Terry's children, which I'm really worried is to be Avatar babies. But, Kate Winslet is enough to make me think, okay, there'll be some new adults around as well, because the last thing I need are a bunch of blue children running through the jungle. In fact, I would love to see Kate Winslet play a human villain, put her in the giant mech suit and let her punch all of Jake and Terry's children to death and get some vengeance. That's what I want from an Avatar sequel, is Kate Winslet in a robot punching babies. Bring it on, James Cameron.
That got dark real quick.
Yeah. Well, Ben was saying yesterday, that, talking about Terminator and how the first Terminator was a horror film and the second one was kind of like the sci-fi action film. And I was theorizing, what if the Avatar sequels do that with Avatar? That they become this totally different thing. I'm not sure what that would be. I'm not sure how Kate Winslet would fit into that, but she's... I was going to say that she's an actress that is very choosy on what projects she picks. She usually picks some elevated films and elevated characters, but she was also involved in Divergent series, so I don't know. And Collateral Beauty, which maybe looked elevated on paper. I don't know. But I'm not sure if this excites me anymore. Ben, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm just surprised that she's doing this, because I always heard stories about how she hated James Cameron when they were making Titanic, because he put her through hell in that movie. Like, I mean, she was in a water tank for whatever percentage of the film, and like he was just, all of the stories were about how much of a dictator he was on that set. And I thought I read somewhere that she said that she would never work with James Cameron again, but that may have been, just an internet legend quote kind of thing that was circulating around the time. But yeah, I'm surprised that they maybe just enough time has passed. Time will heal all wounds, and she's forgotten the hell that he put her through. But I think the future Avatar movies are supposed to involve water a lot too, so that maybe she should be a little worried about that.
Now I'm thinking maybe she is a Na'vi, or a alien creature of some kind, because maybe an actress like Kate Winslet would be attracted to the idea of performance capture in kind of, the freedom that could give an actor.
Yeah, and I don't think she's done that before thus far.
But then you lose her in all the digital makeup, if you want to call it that. Whereas for sure, put Sam Worthington behind digital, because who cares about Sam Worthington? I want Kate Winslet, damn it. I want her in my movie. I want her doing something physically.
But I think Zoe Saldana is not lost behind the digital makeup in that first Avatar. I feel like, there's some clips like you can see online of the performance capture in the final movie side by side, and it's pretty dead on. I mean, she does look like a blue alien, but it definitely captures her.
Yeah, we'll see what she does here.
Also in the casting news is, it seems like, I'm not interested in this Venom movie. I don't want to see a Spider-Man-less Spidey universe film. But it seems like almost every single decision they're making is like they're sitting in a room and they're like, how can we get Peter interested? Okay, we'll cast this guy. Well, whatever. It seems like the latest is just another bit of pulling me in. Ben, what do we know?
Yes, Jenny Slate from Obvious Child and Parks and Recreation, a bunch of great things, is apparently in negotiations to star as a scientist in Sony's new Venom movie. So, as Peter mentioned, they have a terrific cast so far. Tom Hardy is playing Venom. Riz Ahmed is in this movie. Michelle Williams is in this movie. And now Jenny Slate. So it's like a very eclectic, weird group of actors who are mostly known for sort of lower budget, quieter type of films. I mean, Hardy is definitely the big breakout there, but he has plenty of smaller films on his resume. He's not just a blockbuster kind of guy, even though he has dabbled in that area before. Jenny Slate, I mean, this is going to be the first time that she's been in a movie of this size and scale. And man, I mean, Marvel Studios has always done a really great job of pulling in, super talented people in their casting department, and it seems like maybe they're rubbing off on on Sony here too. So we don't really know any more about Jenny Slate's character other than that she's just going to play a scientist. But I hope this is a meaty role for her. I hope this is something where she can actually show some more range, and it's not just going to be a Judy Greer type of situation where she gets cast and walks through two scenes and that's about it.
Can I share a horror story with you, Ben?
Yes.
My horror story is once upon a time there was a movie called Iron Man 3 that cast Rebecca Hall and got everybody really excited. Then she did nothing in the movie, and she was also a scientist. So
no.
I'm deeply worried they're going to cast somebody charismatic and funny and charming, and then say, your job is to say exposition and then die.
Yeah, and that's a good example too, because that movie was written and directed by Shane Black, who I think all of us really like his work. And this movie is being written by Scott Rosenberg and Jeff Pinkner. Jeff Pinkner wrote The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and both of them are working on the new Jumanji movie. So I am basically not exactly thrilled at those guys being the people tasked with bringing Venom to life on the screen here. So yeah, that sort of puts a damper on whatever excitement we have about Jenny Slate in this film.
Yeah, I'm a bit cynical like Jacob about her being a scientist, because it definitely connects to exposition, and her also being a comedian. Kind of, it seems like they're going to be like, let's make the exposition funny, so the people will be entertained. But who knows? We know nothing about this movie. We'll have to wait and see. But that does it for the news. Before we go into our feature presentation, I got to say goodbye to both Ben and Jacob. Ben, you can find at Ben Pears on Twitter. You can find Jacob at Jacob S. Hall on Twitter. Thank you guys for joining me.
You got it.
See you, Peter.
And joining me for our feature presentation is Hoai-Tran Bui to talk about the quest to keep Blade Runner 2049 reviews spoiler-free and the rise of spoiler culture. How's it going, HT?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So this is a great article on slashfilm.com. Everybody can go there and read it. But for those who haven't, give us a little taste.
So IndieWire wrote this really great in-depth piece about how Warner Brothers has been keeping a particularly tight lid on Blade Runner 2049 spoilers. So we've seen as of late that there haven't been a lot of Blade Runner advanced screenings for press and media. And at first, this struck up some concern amongst the film community because when studios tend to have fewer screenings or keep embargoes later, that is usually an indication that they don't believe that a movie will do well, or that they don't trust the movie will do well.
I believe Mashable, Josh Dickey and Angie Han, former editor of SlashFilm.com, put together an article a few weeks back kind of chronicling a bunch of films and showing that the later the embargo date for reviews, generally the lower the Rotten Tomatoes score. So it does correlate.
Yes, but that doesn't seem to be the case for Blade Runner, because it's been getting a lot of great buzz leading up to the release this weekend. And it seems that Warner Brothers has been so keeping such a tight lid on these screenings is because they've been worried about spoilers getting out. So Denis Villeneuve and a lot of the executives at Warner Brothers have a belief that any plot points from the film are a spoiler for the film. So they have had fewer screenings, and they've also had this questionable handout, which they gave to some Houston reviewers, imploring that they do not release 5 particular plot points from the film in their reviews. So this kind of incited a sort of heated discussion about how far studios can go to keep back these spoilers, and how much spoiler culture can sort of be a detriment to the film community, and whether it is a detriment to the film community. So I wrote an article about this, and I am a firm non-believer in spoiler culture. Well, not a non-believer, but I think that a lot of the thought process around spoilers is a little bit overblown. I do not think that every tiny detail or every tiny twist deserves to be completely kept such a tight hold of. I think that, like, if a film is well made, then one twist or one shocking death won't ruin a movie for you. But that's my own personal opinion. Peter, what do you think about sort of spoiler culture in general, and how Warner Brothers has approached the spoilers with Blade Runner?
See, this isn't going to be that exciting of a conversation, because I'm kind of in your camp that I think we put, as a society, we put too much value in spoilers, and how much a twist or a reveal, how much value that has on a movie or story. I mean, we were talking about Toy Story 3 yesterday on the podcast, and, you know, a moment that made you cry. And I bet you, if I told you that was coming, I bet you if we put it on right now and you watch that, you would tear up during that moment. And you know it's coming. You know exactly where that story's going, and it doesn't ruin your enjoyment or ruin the emotional ride that you get out of that. I've many times, I think probably on the podcast, I've mentioned that, like, most people from my generation or younger probably saw Empire Strikes Back knowing the line, "Luke, I am your father," you know, knowing that going into it. That was, you know, it's considered the biggest spoiler of all time. And we all went into it. And still, when that reveal happens, Luke's reaction, we feel for him. You know what I mean? It's still, I don't feel like anybody of my generation who saw that movie, knowing that, felt cheated then. And in rewatching the movie, I still, you know, get chills. Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah. I feel like this tension that has risen up around spoilers has only become a recent phenomenon. So this has definitely become more ubiquitous with the rise of internet forum boards, and the sort of how information can spread so quickly about a movie even before it comes out. And, you know, when we have a big shocking twist on The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones, for example, you immediately see all the reactions on Twitter. And that's what these shows or these movies are going for. They're going for that gut reaction. But I think that there's just too much of an emphasis on this sort of importance of this twist and that immediate reaction versus what it does for the narrative as a whole.
Oh, for sure. And I do think it should be a larger story about society. I not to be like grumpy old man.
This is about society,
whatever.
You know?
No, but I feel like we've become less courteous. And back in the day, whatever that day is, people were more courteous to protect spoilers and whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like people today are less thinking about that. And because of that, you get a lot of people that are quote unquote hurt by these revelations in public. And I'm not saying that I want Star Wars Last Jedi spoiled for me. I want to go in and I want to enjoy it, but I don't think learning about anything ahead of time, which I delve into spoilers all the time, this is this job. We have to. I don't think, I loved The Force Awakens. I knew almost everything that was going to happen in The Force Awakens before I went into that screening, and I loved it probably more so than the people that didn't.
Yeah, I think if it's a particularly well-made film, then knowing the end or knowing the big twist won't spoil your enjoyment of that film. Pun intended. Yeah. Like, I had the same experience with The Sixth Sense, for example, which is one of the most famously known spoilers of all time. I knew the twist going in, and I still enjoyed the movie regardless. I thought it was a really well-made film. I knew the twist with Psycho, which is something that is even people who aren't really into cinema just know that twist immediately. So I just think that there's too much. People are just too up in arms about these kind of things. Yeah. Although I do think that you're right. People kind of are more lackadaisical, I guess, with their approach towards spoilers or approach towards just like other people's own experience with things. And I think that also.
And I don't even think it's just in that. I think there's a courtesy. Like, I see people on the road, cutting people off. I don't know. It just feels less. At least from what I remember, like my childhood. I don't know. I feel like I'm sounding like an old man, but
back before technology existed.
Yeah, but it's interesting though. Studios are so nervous about these spoilers. We talked a few weeks ago about how we go on set visits, and even on those set visits, even though our coverage is embargoed until if the first or second trailer is coming out, they're being very cautious of what they tell us on set and stuff like that. They're even being guarded there, even though there is an embargo. I think it's interesting that for this film they gave out kind of like a guideline asking critics to protect of 5 main story points. I haven't seen the film yet, and I have not read these story points, so I don't know if that's ridiculous or not. I think it's interesting because there was such a backlash for this particular move because it was reviews, and reviews are, I think, separate from first reactions on Twitter, for example, or preview articles that people write, because reviews are much more in the hands of these critics themselves. They feel like an ownership towards them. So that's why I think there's such backlash against the studio, against Warner Brothers' move by giving this handout, because it felt like it could be the start of a slippery slope towards like studio censorship of film critics, for example. I mean, I can definitely see that. I can see that argument, but I don't think we need to discuss those kind of things weeks before the general public gets to see the film, because what do they get out of it? Us discussing some big twist in the end of the film,
right?
But I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It is a dangerous slope. It is. I don't know. I just feel like I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question. I feel like that is an interesting way of going, to be like, listen, we want to protect these 3 things, and talk about the film however you want, whatever. But be conscious of these 3 topics or something.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think also if audience goers don't want to avoid spoilers, they can just avoid reviews altogether. Because I know when I am excited about a film and I want to go in as fresh as possible, then I won't read any reviews. I won't even look at the headlines. So people who are upset at reviews or articles speaking about these movies, you can just not click on it.
People are actually upset now about our headlines of like these early review articles, our early buzz, giving away what the consensus from the reviewers are for a movie. They're like, I don't want to know if people enjoyed this movie or didn't enjoy this. Yeah, people think that's a spoiler. So I feel like spoiler culture is out of control.
It's gotten a little out of hand, definitely. We need to like have a firm definition what a spoiler is. We need to have some sort of statute of limitations on how long a spoiler can be out there or can not be out there, for example. I think we were talking about this earlier with the Han Solo story and about his fate in The Force Awakens, and we're like, okay, it's not a spoiler now. It's been 2 years since The Force Awakens came out.
Yeah, plus I feel like everybody has seen that movie, but would you consider what happens in the first 20 minutes of Up a spoiler?
See, that one is... I don't think that it's a particular, like a twist or a shocking event. I think it's something that feeds into the overall experience of the film. And if you say like, oh, this is what happened to this couple, you see their entire life, it won't really take away or add anything to someone who hasn't seen the film at all. It's kind of like, I was thinking about this with Mad Men and how they really put their foot down with spoilers. And I
used to love their like next week on video, which was like the most ridiculous thing. It
makes no sense because as someone who didn't watch Mad Men, or who's not caught up on Mad Men, people were like, "Oh, this is a spoiler for this next episode." I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. This means nothing to me. So I think that like with those kind of things, those kind of like spoilers, it's just something that will be a different experience for you as someone who's actually a fan of that or who has seen that movie or TV show. It's not really a spoiler.
So the question is, I mean, we every day are dealing with spoilers on the site, and we are having to make these hard decisions of how we cover certain things and how do we want to be courteous. We want to not spoil things for our listeners, our readers. I think the general line that we usually put is if it's in the trailer, it's, something we can talk openly about because it's something that if it's something the filmmakers want out there and the studio wants out there, it's something we can discuss openly. It's not like something we have to hide.
Yeah, it's fair game. I think there are some trailers that reveal too much, and it's helpful when we've had someone who's already seen the movie and are like, okay, this is a spoiler for the movie. We want to put that in the headline and like hide the trailer down a little bit further. But I think in most cases, if it's in the trailer, yeah, it's fair game.
So the question is, HT, going forward with spoilers, how do we handle this? Like, Star Wars Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams' mystery box is always, locked closed. And when with Force Awakens, they didn't even at the junket show not the movie. Usually the movie is shown for press for the junket before journalists can interview the stars and the cast and crew. They didn't show 1 second of footage at the junket. And, I'm betting that's going to be the same way, with J.J. Abrams back for Star Wars Episode 9. So what is the way to protect against spoilers? Just not to screen the movie until the week of release?
Well, I think that Warner Brothers, they tried a couple strategies with this. So with the idea of like Critics Buzz, they apparently had an advanced screening in which they allowed social media to have their embargo lifted. So I think in that case, that first reaction from social media is the best option because you can't really go into spoilers and people are less indignant if you put limitations to how much you can spoil through Twitter or through Facebook because it's just like their own personal opinion and like quickly said in 140 characters or 280 characters or less. So I think that
but now some of these people are doing like 5 tweets in a row. Is that a review or is that a first reaction?
See, that's a whole other debate, I think. But I think this is the best bet, by that you can have like the happy medium between not endangering your relationship with the studio's relationship with critics and going for censorship, whatever, and having that word of mouth and buzz that will drive a movie along. So I think social media will probably be the best way to go, which is ironic because social media has kind of been the bane of spoiler culture.
Yeah.
But I think that studios could use it to their advantage when dealing with a movie that is so spoiler heavy, like Blade Runner.
I think what would be interesting, and I think many critics would probably hate this, is what if they put 2 embargo dates? One for first reaction, kind of like the Twitter thing, where you can say whatever you want, but not, have this list of like plot points that they don't want you to discuss. Mm-hmm. And then the week of release have an embargo date that like all reviews, whatever you want, no holds barred. Like, I feel like that would be the way to go to protect against spoilers, but I feel like critics would feel like that is too much.
Yeah, they might hate that. That is kind of what they did with Blade Runner. So yeah. If it pans out, then that might be the strategy they use from now on.
Well, anyways, you can read this whole article from HT on slashfilm.com. We'll link it in the show notes. HT, where can we find more of your work online?
You can find me at slashfilm.com. I'm on Twitter at Hoai-Tran Bui, and I have a podcast, the Millennial Falcon Podcast, on iTunes.
Cool. And you can find this podcast published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please give us a rating, a review on iTunes. That helps us out quite a bit. Spread the word. Tell your friends. If you have a question for the mailbag, peter@slashfilm.com. And we will see you tomorrow.